it seems that we are in this very complicated world where Europe has to find its way, a multi-amorous world, as they put it, a world in which middle powers create their own coalitions, not necessarily against us, but also not necessarily with us. This complex environment is very difficult for Europe to navigate. Europe is very much a ship that sails by the rules, and the rule books seem to be not valid for anybody else. And sometimes it's not probably even valid for ourselves internally. And so the purpose of this panel would be to try and look what is that Europe wants to do with this moment of choice. We discussed that, that the world is different. We fail to see how different it is. And maybe I will start with a question of diagnosis to all of you. So what is the biggest change that you think Europe needs to react to? And then maybe we can delve a little bit more into the issue of hard power. But so first the diagnosis. Maybe we can start with our Spanish colleague, Diego Martinez Bello, who is the State Secretary of the Spanish Foreign Ministry, please.
Thank you. It's working, okay. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to have
Is it working?
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
To have the ECFR meeting here in Madrid this year. So some of the what's changing, and I saw Mr. Krastev saying before, is he spoke about demography. And there are things which are linked to demography. That means economic, political, military weight. That's changing very quickly, but impressively quickly. In fact, the quickest change rate in history. And it's very, I mean, the rate of change is so enormous that it's very difficult for us to adapt psychologically and hence politically. So that's, I mean, that's why we perhaps are finding difficulties in finding a response to the current situation. So, these are deep trends. These are not going away. In fact, we are as big in economic and demographic terms as we are ever going to be in our lifetime, most likely. So this is something we need to integrate in the way we make policy and the way we make foreign policy. So what that means is, first of all, we have to build up our internal resilience and capabilities. In general, that means economic growth, of course, etc., but that's a bigger proposition. But on some crucial sectors, we saw with the pandemic, now with the war in Ukraine, dependencies, not enough manufacturing capability here in Europe for many critical sectors. So that's something we need clearly to work upon and very quickly, and we're already doing it, and we should step up the pace, especially in the sector of defense, and perhaps we can talk about that later. Then on more specific aspects of foreign policy, I think we need to prioritize. We ask very many things of our partners. And our partners may be the United States, and that's a developed, rich country, but they can also be very, or states that face many challenges. And we are asking them many things at the same time. So in fact, we should perhaps reduce the number of asks and prioritize also what we expect from our partners, and I think that would lead to more useful conversations and more useful and more effective policy as well. And the High Representative mentioned something before, and I think on the perceptions of others. And I think as a result of our history, we are too self-centered. So we don't take other third parties' perceptions. We don't give them the importance that they really have. So, I mean, when you speak with someone at a meeting or you're establishing a policy, I mean, I think that I would say this is the crucial part of diplomatic activity, and to understand the other side's perspective. And we tend clearly not to do that, and I think that's a common criticism, and you hear it outside, and you hear it inside the European Union as well. So I think also that as a result of this past history of very significant power in the world, we haven't, again, changed our mindset. And I was speaking with our Estonian friend before, and we, at the European level, we don't coordinate enough. And I'm not speaking about the Foreign Affairs Council. I'm speaking at other levels of foreign ministries, foreign policy, etc. And sometimes we even compete with each other. So we complain because, I don't know, some African country makes a partnership with China or other countries we wouldn't want to see, and then we are doing small things, each in a separate way, and sometimes competing with each other. So I think that's something we need to change as well.
Thank you very much. Quite a lot of challenges. So Stefano, maybe I turn to you next. Stefano Sonnino, you probably all know him, the Secretary General of the EU External Action Service. You have been in this position in the most turbulent of times, probably. But if you have to pick the one big change that happened, what would that be, in your view? The one that we really have to adapt to, let's put it this way.
Well, I think that maybe the biggest change that we are facing now is that we are living in a world that is constantly contested at all levels, in all regions, and with different instruments. I think that the accumulation of crises over these 20 years that we have gone one after the other has created a completely different landscape in terms of how geopolitics has been run in many years, because we have gone essentially from a situation of from someone I said, it's not mine, but I quote it, from bipolarism to unipolarism, and from unipolarism to chaos. So we have a world where essentially we do not have any specific compass to navigate. So we are trying to give ourselves new instruments, new methodology, a new way of looking at how to rearrange the international relations, but it's, this is not easy because we are facing a return of the military might in a very substantial, in a very invisible way. We are facing the new complexity of our security, which is going from the protection of critical infrastructure to the cyber, to the disinformation, or to the weaponization of all possible policies. We have essentially, we need to look at all these things at the same time. So we just cannot think that if we are improving our military capacity, this will shield us from the threats that we are facing. And we cannot think that if we are doing other things and not the military strength, this can shield us from the threats. And in this situation, we have another big challenge, that is that of convincing our societies about the need to look at the cost of our security and what it means for all of us to have security, which is the basis on which we are have based our way of living, our democracy, our values, our system. And if we want to preserve it, then we need to be able to face the costs that this is requiring. So in a way, the landscape has changed again completely. We have to find, before both President Costa and her representative were defining the complexity of the foreign security, external policies that we need to take into account, how we can manage to work with third countries, especially when it comes to continents that are facing us, Africa or Asia or Latin America. How we reconcile the consistency of our principles, of what we have always fought for, and at the same time also how we create a different pattern of relationship without necessarily going around lecturing everybody about which is the right thing to do.
Jonathan Seviov is the Secretary General of the Estonian Foreign Ministry, and I'm personally very pleased to have him. I believe it's your first, but hopefully not your last annual council meeting. You, Estonia, that is, and the other Baltic countries, among others, have been warning other EU member states about Russia and about the possibility of the war, without calling it lecturing, and I think this is not going to be adequate here, but I think the fact that you have been sounding the alarm bell has won you a sort of kind of privilege in European foreign policy making. And I guess the question would be, could have the EU done things differently, but also what is the lesson for you from that as we look forward?
Wow. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I haven't opened my mouth yet, so wait till I conclude to determine whether I will be invited back or not. But I first want to say that High Representative Borrell talked about the potato salad that he leaves on the desk. I don't know if there is anything that can be described as a proper Estonian cuisine. And I assure you it's not the Russians. We do not eat the Russians. But if anything at all, it's potato salad. That's what we eat. So usually eaten cold, not hot. So I'm sure that we'll be able to deal with the number of potatoes. You know, we get the question often, how does it make you feel? It doesn't make us feel any particular way. We warned about the dangers of Putin's Russia. We continue talking about the dangers of Putin's Russia. I think we no longer feel that we're the canary in the coal mine, just yelling out alone. We feel that Europe has awoken. And it's a very comforting feeling, frankly, from our perspective. Now, a reference was made to the European Championships on listing problems, and I do agree with this. I don't want to compete in that championships, but the list of challenges is obviously mind-boggling. But nowhere are we challenged as Europeans as directly and as brutally as by Russia and Ukraine today. Part of the diplomat's job is to explain what their leaders meant when they said certain things. And our Prime Minister has used the word existential when describing the war in Ukraine, and in particular its outcome. And I have to go around the world and explain what she meant, and it's the easiest part of my job because she meant what she said. It's existential. And not because of the proximity of the fighting to Estonia. It's not. I mean, it's as far from Berlin as it is from Tallinn. It's existential because whether we want it or not, the outcome of this war will shape de facto norms of European security. And if we allow it to become the norm that under certain circumstances a major global nuclear power, a United Nations Security Council permanent member can change its neighbors' borders with force, then show me on the map of Europe a border that remains secure. And remember, the legitimacy of most of the borders around the world is derived from the fact that they are internationally recognized. They don't follow ethnic or historic or cultural or geographic lines in many parts of the world. They're internationally recognized. That's why they exist. So if we allow this norm to be thrown out of the window, then are we not opening a Pandora's box we Europeans know perfectly well not to reopen? And secondly, if we allow the concept of sovereignty to be rendered as nothing more than an empty phrase in outdated treaties with the great powers of the world dividing up territories between them, deciding whether Ukraine gets to keep this or whether Russia gets to keep that, deciding whether Ukraine gets to choose its own allies or not, then which one of us European countries is big enough to feel secure that it wouldn't happen to us? And certainly not Estonia. I would challenge anyone in Europe to raise their hand and say that we will remain safe and secure. And most importantly, I would say, if we allow the most basic of international rules, the UN Charter, the Helsinki Final Act, to be trampled upon in our backyard, and come out of this with a result where the aggressor has managed to get something out of it, then who are we? I mean, remember, we're not defined as international players by the words that we use or even by the action that we undertake. We're defined by the results that we manage to achieve. Now, we may be able to hide the fact whether we win or lose for a week or a month or a year, but not indefinitely. We either defend those principles in our backyard or we fail to defend those principles in our backyard. And if we're no longer defined by that idea, that we're the ones upholding a rules-based international law order, the rule book that you made reference to, then what continues to unite us? Today we have a problem with one member state. But the world is watching, our own people are watching. Aggression as a tool of statecraft was fundamentally discredited for Europeans in 1945, and that has been one of the reasons why much of Europe has enjoyed peace and prosperity. The future will be defined by the results that we manage to get out of this. Now, I'm not going to go into what needs to happen. I'm sure there will be a follow-on question. But I just want to end with a note of optimism. I mean, we often talk ourselves down for perhaps obvious reasons. We go around the world. Europe has a difficult history with many parts of the world. We get it. We have difficulties getting to consensus in Brussels. Yes, it's true, but then again, there's more than 400 million of us. We're amongst the richest people in the world. And we're in this struggle that we've described as existential with a country that Senator John McCain once famously described as a gas station with nukes. We're discussing whether to spend 0.25% of our GDP on assisting Ukraine. Some have suggested 0.3%. Some would suggest 0.2%. 0 point something we're debating. We can do this. It shouldn't even be that hard. So I think what we need is a little bit of self-confidence, a little bit of focus, putting our money where our mouth is, and just being very, very clear with ourselves and our people that we will not be able to hide ourselves from history. This is a direct challenge, an existential one for Europe, that we will not only rise to meet, but will be able to successfully conclude. And then the European Championships on listing problems continues. And the Middle East is still going to be on fire, and the rise of China still needs to be managed, and our relationship with Africa still needs to be handled. The question is whether we will deal with the list of problems from a position of having defended the most basic of rules in our backyard, or we face the same list of problems after having failed to defend those most basic of rules of international life in our backyard. If we fail, we'll be not a united Europe, but a bunch of quarreling mid-sized powers. So in that choice, my suggestion always would be to focus on winning this. We can do this.
I will ask my colleagues to put up one slide that I wanted to show you that Mark didn't, and this is the importance of the war for the countries that we interviewed in our latest survey, for the country's future, for Europe's future, and for the future of America. And it's quite clear that for the Europeans, there is an overwhelming agreement in the diagnosis. And there is I would call it this, basically a majority, clear majority view that the war is extremely important for the fate of Europe. I will now turn to Nathalie Loiseau, who is a member of the European Parliament, both as a member of the European Parliament, but also as a French. given that we're also 3 days away from the second round of the French elections. As Stefano was saying, we need to be selling this to our publics. We need the fact that Europe needs to make this strategic choice about its future. How do we do this, in your view?
Well, I was a career diplomat for 26 years, but I don't want to be diplomatic today because I have a sense of urgency. Because I'm French, and because we have historical elections in the coming days, which could lead to populism, leading one of the founding members of the European Union. And also because Russia has not been defeated yet. China is a threat, the Middle East is in fire, and Donald Trump could be the next American president. So there's no time for diplomacy and nice words. Never has strategic autonomy been more relevant, even if its strongest promoter, Emmanuel Macron, has never been weaker. We have not completed our cultural revolution, what Olaf Scholz called Zeitenwende, going from strategic dependencies to strategic autonomy. We have made our growth on cheap energy coming from Russia, cheap goods coming from China, cheap security coming from America. And it seems that it takes some time for us to change our mindsets. Yes, we have done quite a lot for Ukraine, and thank you, Josep Borrell, for triggering a European Peace Facility for Ukraine and for helping the training of Ukrainian military. That's a lot, that's unprecedented, but you know and we know it's not enough. And it has been slowed down recently because of one country, Hungary. It could be several countries in the near future. Yes, we have begun to talk with China in a slightly different way, putting tariffs on electric vehicles. But it looks like we are afraid by our old boldness. While the rest of the world is led by meat eaters, we are still sheep in the middle of wolves. And it's not enough. And yes, we talk a lot about the risk of a Trump 2 presidency, but we are not prepared yet. And let me tell you, I'm terribly disappointed by the results of the last European Council and how the chapter on defense was weakened, and lack of ambition and lack of creativity was the smallest common consensus. What should we do? And I would simply echo what my predecessor said. There's priority 1, Ukraine, priority 2, Ukraine, priority 3, Ukraine. Just because the outcome of the war in Ukraine has huge consequences on our relevance, our trustworthiness, and our leadership. If we want to be respected, we have to be able to support Ukraine not as long as it takes, but as much as it takes. We have to manufacture more weapons and ammunition faster, delivering them to Ukraine, delivering what Ukraine needs. And so far, the numbers are not so great. And promises were made that were not put in place. We did a few things about ammunition, for instance. But it was just a first step. We need orders, that is financing of our military ambition and our support for Ukraine. We need to be creative. We were able to be creative when we were hit by a virus. And now we are talking about an existential threat to our security, and not just Estonian security, Spanish security as well. And we cannot be creative. This strikes me like we have forgotten about the rest of the world. We have to incentivize our defense industries. They must be encouraged to invest, not deterred So far, we have not encouraged them. The European Investment Bank gets small signals that it should do more. But it's not a time for small signals. It's a time for being determined, for resolved. We have taxonomy. So people tell you, no, but if you read carefully, taxonomy does not prevent financial institutions for financing defense industries. This is theory. We don't live in theory. When I go and meet SMEs, they say that banks don't follow them because of taxonomy. We need to give a clear signal about it. And we need to react to hybrid attacks, not just document hybrid attacks. I have spent 5 years listening to people telling me how much we were attacked. Okay, I get it. What I don't get is, what do we do about it? What makes us unable yet to rise up to the challenge? Are we too poor to afford more efforts? I don't believe it. As you said, we are a wealthy continent. We did much more during the Cold War, and we were not that wealthy at the time. Is it that we are not properly convinced that we are under threat? Probably. We love our comfort, and we don't pay attention. We don't really want to make efforts. We don't spend enough time explaining it to our fellow citizens. We are mostly divided and manipulated. I heard you, Antonio, think that you want to unite the European Council. Of course, you have to try. That will be your job. But it's not getting any better. Hungary might be followed by Slovakia, and hopefully not, but never know, my home country. So European efforts cannot be EU efforts only, because every time you need unanimity, the most reluctant slows down the efforts. Ad hoc coalitions are not a growth word. Ad hoc decisions must be possible. Not every single member of the European Union will be ready to take the right decision at the right pace. And there is one European country having election today, which is a reliable partner and needs to be brought back to the conversation. And this is the United Kingdom.
Thank you. I will ask maybe to show, for us to show the other slide on increasing the ammunition and weapon supplies, even if it costs more. And I think this is also one which is telling about the willingness of Europeans really also to add funds and effort. So maybe I will, if you allow me, I have more questions to you, but maybe I'll just open up now because I'm sure there are questions, also reactions in the audience. We seem to be in agreement on Ukraine, but the question is what to do from now on. The question is whether we can be prepared for the years to come. And I'm happy to give the floor to our speakers to answer this. But if you have in the meantime any questions, reactions, yes.
Katarina Maternova, this time already in Kiev as EU ambassador. 2 quick reactions. One is, let's call a spade a spade. We have agency. It's the West that has agency and will determine how the war will end. Clearly not the public opinion. There we have a big split. But Russia has, and I think you alluded to our Estonian colleague, Russia has the economy the size of Spain. Spain is a lovely and a big country, but that's the economy. The EU is much, much bigger. So we have agency. We will decide. And how to do it, I think we are trying to hear from you, how to change how to nudge us in the right direction. Obviously, the elections will have a big impact. And one very concrete thing on the question of what to do, we need to scale up. But one thing that has not been tapped at all, and this is something that I talk about wherever I can, let's ask the Ukrainians, let's procure in Ukraine. Ukrainian industry, defense industry, has much, much more capacity than is being utilized for because they don't have money. Last week I went to a top drone factory in Kiev, the one that produced the drone that downed the Lancet, the Russian Lancet, the first time ever. And it was sad. They were running at 12% capacity because they don't have orders, because they don't have money. Top equipment and not producing. So I think that's one of the very concrete things that we should be doing.
Thank you. Can I give you?
Thank you. Heather Graby from the economics think tank Bruegel. So one thing we're not seeing in this polling is the trade-off that Vladimir Putin actually faces. There are a lot of questions to both Ukrainians and to EU members about trade-offs between peace and giving up territory. Is that trade-off actually available to Vladimir Putin? By now, his war economy and indeed his political regime depend on remaining in a state of perpetual war. He actually cannot afford to have any kind of peace, because then how is he going to run the Russian economy with its very high levels of inflation, without access to external markets? By now, he's in a political economy which he actually can't come out of war. So I think the real question to be asking is it a good idea to offer Putin additional targets beyond Ukraine? I think we have to think very carefully about where he might attack next if Ukraine became unavailable to him as the primary focus of his war machine. Because by this point, he doesn't really have an option to return to the global economy and to return to a state of peace.
Thank you. Can you pass the mic?
Hi, Kasia Pisarska, I'm the chair of the Warsaw Security Forum. Building on what Heather said, actually, if you guys had a superpower and have been able to fully control how the European Union strategy looks like, what would be your strategy on Russia? What do you think Europe's strategy on Russia should look like for the next 1, 5, 10 years? Thanks.
Okay, we have a coherence of questions, I would say. I don't know who would like to go first. Maybe we can start with Stefano. The question of the Russia strategy has been on your mind, I assume.
I would be tempted to say in a line much of the same for longer, but I think that it's not been long, it's not enough. And there is an element, and then I go to what also Caterina was saying, I mean, we will need certainly to step up the military support. I mean, that's the basic point. If we want to make it sure, I mean, everybody speaks about peace. If we want peace, then we have to give more arms to the Ukrainians. That's the point. And to give them the possibility to defend themselves. And in a different way compared with what they've been doing up until now. There are some decent signs which are showing up, which is not bad in terms of being more creative. But then there is another element which I think which is already part of our strategy already now, because one was arming Ukraine, the second one was sanctioning Russia, but the third one was also isolating Russia. And that's maybe something that we could do more over time. There is a big issue that is there, the no-limit partnership with China, which is not an irrelevant element from that point of view. But there must be an effort that we have to do in a more sophisticated way about how we can avoid that the sanction circumvention, the different ways to keep on Russian afloat can be avoided. I think that to come to the point of Caterina, she's right. I mean, we have on the one hand we are increasing our capacity. By the way, we keep on buying also elsewhere, because as long as we do not have sufficient in the capacity ourselves, we need to continue buying where we can. But we need to do much more in terms of capacity for the Ukrainians themselves in Ukraine. That has also started. It's one of the 3 strands of work that we will develop in using the windful profits of the mobilized Russian assets, which were essentially we will provide financial capacities to Ukraine to produce themselves. Caterina is right, not only do they have untapped capacity, but I think that nobody is more able to understand which are the needs and how they can readjust constantly the capacity productions than the Ukrainians themselves, and they have shown this. So I think that could be, again, what we should continue doing for the time that we have in front of us.
Thank you, Diego. Maybe if you can maybe address also this issue of public procurement and what is that we can do more on that side.
Thank you. First on the strategy in Russia, and I think it's the simplest strategic choice perhaps there's ever been, is supporting Ukraine in defeating Russia's aggression. And this is the best bang for the buck you can get in geostrategic terms, I think even conceivably. And of course, under the current circumstances. And I would like to strike somewhat more, I normally don't do this, but a more optimistic note. You had the polls there on the importance of the Ukraine matter for the different countries. There's another poll in the ECFR, another question in the ECFR poll on support for providing weapons to Ukraine. And among the highest support rates are Spain, but Portugal as well. And these are the 2 most geographically distant countries from Ukraine. So I don't think this is something Putin was thinking of when I think he was rather betting on the opposite. And also our response from Portugal to the rest of the European Union was a surprise to him. I don't think he was expecting these 14 packages of sanctions, Russian gas almost cut off completely from Europe, etc. So I think I came here with a more pessimistic message, but since everyone is more pessimistic, I try to strike a more positive note. On procurement, we should, of course, strengthen our defense production, our defense producing capabilities. We have a meeting with people here in Spain, and there was a joint communication recently on the European Defense Industrial Strategy, which points in the right direction. We have the EDIP, which is now has a 1.5 billion until 2027. So this is a modest amount given the needs. But I think what we should do is look, and I think there are hints that the debate is moving in this direction, is to have a much more significant funding in the next MFF for the EIP. So that's a positive note, and something we should do. And another thing is on the EPF, and the High Representative mentioned it before. I think it's a very useful instrument, something that we probably wouldn't have thought of doing 5 years ago. Even we had this thing in the treaty saying that we couldn't provide military material through the budget. So this is something that has changed, and this is something, a flexible instrument, which is very useful. And it helps us also in speaking with partners all over the world, because it responds to very specific needs in the current geostrategic environment. So again, I spoke and more other people spoke about changing our mindset. And our response, I think, to the pandemic, also to Ukraine, has been very good if we think this is just one-off crisis. So then it's very impressive. If we think this is a structural change, and I think it's insufficient. So it's a good first step, but we need to step up.
How can we step up if we have a Le Pen government in France? President-elect Costa was talking about unity quite a lot. I'm just trying to imagine how this is going to work.
I will not be reassuring, and I'm not optimistic. First, going back to the previous speaker, he talked about a very nice paper, European Defence Investment Programme and Strategy. Very nice paper, very nice words. We are so good at that in the European Union. We spend months discussing and negotiating words. But behind EDIP, you have 1.5 billion euros. Imagine Donald Trump stop supporting Ukraine. What do we do with that? We are still very far away from what needs to be done urgently. And don't talk about the next MFF. Don't watch Ukrainians in the eyes and tell them that they have to wait until the next MFF so that we are ready. They are on the front line. This is not up to the challenge we are facing. And you're right, this could be worse if we have a far-right government in France as early as next week. We as politicians from the democratic side of the political landscape are doing everything possible on earth to avoid it. My party leader, who is center-right, just announced that he would vote in favor of a communist candidate. It's not completely dramatic, let's say. There's never been such a cordon sanitaire as the one we are trying now. But voters don't belong to us if they don't want to do to go in the direction we are trying to show. There are no reassuring words about it. Some people say that foreign policy and defense are a specific domain in which the president is the only one who decides. This is not true. Because when it comes to funding, when it comes to voting the budget, this is the government. And we all know that right now, the heart of the matter is money. And we all know that, we have even more clarity since yesterday. The Russian Foreign Ministry publicly supported the far right for the election in France. They said that they hoped the far right would win because they would have a more reasonable foreign policy. So you get the signal that they are the puppets of Putin. The problem is that our voters don't care, they don't listen. They don't read programs, they don't watch debates. They made up their minds months ago. They want a new product on a shelf, which they have not tried before. Why so? Of course, it's all failure. But it's because they have this feeling of discrepancy between public speeches and public achievements. They have the feeling that we don't have the means and the power to do what we say. My country is very much in favor of European defense. 2/3 of French voters, or in the opinion polls, say they want more European defense. 1/3 of Le Pen's voters want more military support for Ukraine. But they still vote for Le Pen because they don't make the linkage between the two. And because they have seen us, heard us, doing beautiful speeches and not delivering. There has been a general lack of real political leadership. Leadership is not about negotiating the conclusion of the European Council word by word. Leadership is about delivering fighter jets to Ukraine. It's nice to be willing to support the Ukrainian defense industry. Of course, I'm in favor of it, but I met with some who said that their facilities are being bombed again and again and again. And there are promises that Ukrainians are still waiting for. Air defense, fighter jets, where are they?
Jonathan, when we talk about Russia's strategy, I think we have to think about it not only in military terms, but also in economic terms. So our long-term task would be really to prepare our economies for this. How do you see this?
So I think and this is just me saying this obviously, but I think our goals as Europeans, our goals vis-à-vis Russia have become as limited as they can possibly be. I would suggest to you that all we want is for Russia to go back into Russia, pull itself back within its internationally recognized borders. Nothing more, but nothing less. I think we've learned as Europeans over the past few years that we can live without a constructive relationship with Russia. Whether or not Russia can survive without a constructive relationship with Europe is for them to decide. And if one day they do want to come back to having a constructive relationship with Europe, then that is going to be a lengthy process that has to start with building trust. Because mind you, the Russians aren't just attacking Ukraine in Ukraine, they're attacking every single commitment they themselves have voluntarily taken upon themselves over the past several decades. Fun reading material for all of you is the Helsinki Final Act. Nobody ever reads it these days, but I suggest doing it. The Russians are violating every single one of those commitments. So for us to have a constructive relationship, we need to begin that by rebuilding trust. But first and foremost, our goal is limited. Go back. Pull your invading armies back. Now, I think the two things that Europe needs to do, and I apologize for the bluntness and simplistic nature of the suggestion, but I would use the American saying we need to both talk the talk and walk the walk. Now, talking the talk part is oftentimes overlooked. Oh, these are just words. But words matter. Words matter. We need to be able to articulate to ourselves and to the world two things. What's at stake and what are our goals? European leaders, great leaders from the past have always done this. From Churchill to de Gaulle to Adenauer, always. Those two things. What's at stake and what are our goals? In simple language. The example I often bring to illustrate the point is that nobody rational would ever be willing to go and see the dentist and have a stranger, work on your teeth unless you understood what the stakes of the alternative course of action would be. That you would have a toothache and you'd have a problem. People are willing to do tough things if they understand the cost of not doing the tough thing. So I would suggest first that we need to get better at articulating the stakes in Ukraine. And secondly, on our goals, we use a few slogans for as long as it takes and whatever it takes and so on and so forth, but this is not serious strategic articulation. I would suggest that what we want is territorial integrity and sovereignty as cornerstones of European security restored, aggression as a tool of statecraft, again, fundamentally discredited, and European security that continues to stand on NATO and the European Union as its two pillars, with all those willing to meet the criteria as part of it, including if Ukraine meets the criteria, then also Ukraine. Now, I do recognize that we may not see eye to eye on these goals with other Europeans. There may not be consensus amongst the 27 or even within the countries, which to me tells only one thing. We should have more discussion on this rather than less discussion on this. But we have had a tendency in Europe to avoid those hard questions, to avoid those debates. What is it that we want? What kind of a Russia relationship do we want? What kind of an outcome do we as Europeans want from this war that is going to shape European security? The parameters of peace that comes after this war are going to be of paramount importance for all Europeans, as we've said time and time again here. And yes, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, absolutely. but nothing about Europe without Europe as well. We have agency. I do agree with the EU's ambassador to Ukraine. We may not have consensus today, which means that we should work harder at reaching consensus. And finally, again, coming back to the self-confidence point, I think part of the problem that we have with our self-confidence comes from the fact that we overlook the successes that we've had and assume that they were always going to go the way they went. The 100 million Central and Eastern Europeans who some of us regained our independence in 1991, others got rid of communist dictatorships, 100 million of us. And now, obviously, with our own problems, we're part of the European family, and we've enlarged the zone of prosperity and stability that has benefited not just the 100 billion, but the other 300 million as well. Enlargement has been the most successful strategic tool at our disposal. And it's been marvelous how successful we've been at that. On talking the talk part, I mean, walking the walk part, I think there is no way to hide oneself from the fact that we just need to put more money in. You had the poll up on defense spending. Defense is part of it. It's not the only part, but it's an important part. I think Europe is waking up. European defense spending the trajectory is positive. I would advise to move faster because there is a sense of urgency in this. We may be able to come up with clever solutions like we did with COVID, European solutions, but at the end of the day, eventually our ability to walk the walk boils down to how much we put in. And frankly, the era of peace and stability is over. We need to spend more.
I think here everybody agrees with that. We're going to have also a breakout session on European defense. Our colleague Camille Grand just published a paper on how to exactly do that with the European defense. So I guess we can continue discussing that. I believe we have maybe time for one or two very quick questions. And I'm happy to take them. I'll give you my microphone.
Hi. I would like to ask you about Donald Trump. We are scared if he wins the elections one more time. But what will be the alternative? Has Biden to step down? Or what other candidates you have as good ones?
Thank you very much. I think this is kind of the elephant in the room here, anyhow. So maybe we can talk about Europe's choices, given that Trump may very well be the next year's president. Stefano.
Thanks for giving me this. It's very easy. Look, I think that there is no easy question and there is no easy preparation, or there is nothing easy that can be done. Let's be clear. And it remains very much then in the hands of the people of the United States, what they want to do in terms of voting and who they will elect as president. I think that there are a couple of elements that for me are important, and first of all, that the partnership between the European Union and the United States, it's something that goes a little bit beyond the political cycles, because there is an element which links us and which I think will stay unless there are cataclysmatic changes that are going to create new situations or new conditions. But we are linked for our security, we are linked for our economy, we are linked for our societies. So that's again will stay. It's the political turbulences. I know that it's easy for me to say this. I'm not a politician, so I can afford to take a sort of step back and not to be part of the political fight. The second part of to your question is we need to devise ways to absorb the possible shock that could come from a neo-isolationist policy from a new administration. Often we say that we don't know, that there is an element of unpredictability. We have to base ourselves on what we know now. We see, which is the big program that the Heritage Foundation has prepared for Trump. And on that basis, we are seeing how and which consequences this could have on the different components of our economic, political life, and how to absorb them or to counter them or to deter them as much as possible. But again, these are not easy choices, because all this has a cost. It's very easy to say that we want to crack the door and leave, but it's, this has a number of very complex consequences that we need to think about. And the third point is that this reflection is a reflection that we do not have only in the European Union. There are a number of other countries, neighboring, not neighboring, in the American continent, in the Asian continent, in the European continent, that are also reflecting on what we can do together to, again, to absorb this, this shock wave that could come.
Very good. So I can ask maybe Diego to jump in also in relation to the Global South, as we call it.
Well, thank you. On Trump, well, the American public will vote what they want. On preparation for Trump, I think it's unlikely that what we haven't done in the last 8 years, we will do in the next 7 months. So, and I think we should concentrate on what we can do ourselves. It's a bit depressing to see Europeans saying, what will the Americans do, etc., as if we were some minuscule island with no capacity to decide and take action. So that's on Trump. On the Global South, well, I said it in my first intervention, and I think the changes are huge. They have lots of offer now, and this is natural. We shouldn't, I think, try to tell them off or tell them who they should partner with, first of all, because it doesn't make sense, and we wouldn't accept it the other way around. If we put ourselves sometimes, if we see ourselves saying some things to the countries from the quote-unquote Global South, and we think what would be our reaction if it was the other way around, I think that will make things clearer for us, and some things would seem simply inconceivable. And so I mean, and secondly, because they will partner with whoever offers them something that is of interest to them, and this is the nature of international relations and of human nature, I would say. So I think we have to talk to them on an equal footing. We have to understand what they want. We have to offer something better, something that other parties are not doing. We speak now for Africa because Asia is much bigger than Europe, etc., but Africa is our neighboring continent. And I think many of the parties involved as of now are not real partners for economy and development. So, and I understand this is a very important objective for any country, for African countries as well. So I'm quite sure that if we come up with something which is attractive, which is important, if we also try to do the opposite of what we usually do, is to under-promise and over-deliver. That's what we should do, not what we do. And I think our relation with our African neighbors and friends will improve very quickly and to the benefit of both.
Thank you very much. I would probably now ask Jonathan to say a little bit about, but very briefly, about what you think we can do to prepare for the new American president from an Estonian view.
Prepare is the word that I wrote down for myself before writing down that we should avoid thinking ourselves into paralysis. We need to deal with problems as they appear, but prepare is the key word. And the good thing is that the things that we need to do to prepare for a Trump second term are roughly the same things we need to do to prepare for the second Biden term or for any future American presidents. It's three things. I mean, we need to be able to achieve unity and strategic clarity as Europe, something that we discussed before. This is going to be important for our transatlantic relationship as well. Secondly, I think we need to stand on our 2 feet and take a greater responsibility for European security. Some might call it strategic autonomy, some might call it burden sharing. Europe standing up and taking a greater responsibility for European security is not just about us preparing for a Trump presidency. It is going to be a requirement for any future American presidency, and not just something that we need to do for the sake of this relationship. It's something that we need to do anyways. And third, more directly addressing the relationship itself, we need to continuously engage with everyone in the United States in a bipartisan manner. We all understand how American politics works. It's very turbulent. European political cycle isn't necessarily less turbulent. In the United States, we need to maintain open channels with everyone, with Congress, in a bipartisan manner, with think tanks, with the so-called Trump camp and the Biden camp. We need to talk to everyone and explain something that we failed to explain, I think, to the American people, that the transatlantic relationship is not a one-way street where Europe's the only consumer of the benefits of this relationship. The United States needs this relationship as much as we do. I mean, we need to obviously not only talk the talk, but also walk the walk on this, but it's not a one-way street. And many in the United States, unfortunately, believe that it is. And while many American experts come to Europe to tell us that we shouldn't take the transatlantic relationship for granted, I don't think there are enough European think tankers and observers going to the United States saying the same thing over there. Again, there's more than 400 million of us. I don't think anyone rational in the United States would think that the United States could face the challenge of the 21st century alone without its strong democratic allies. And obviously the Indo-Pacific is very important and the other countries over there, but there are still 440 million of us. So we're not the only consumers here. This message needs to be delivered to the United States. And I'm not only talking about the economic benefit that the United States gets from the Europe relationship, but also the security benefit that the United States gets. But this, again, depends on our own ability to stay united, strategically clear and focused, and our ability to stand on our 2 feet and deliver.
Thank you. Natalie, what is the choice that Europe will have to face if we get, with a new American president? Let's put it this way.
Well, sometimes I say that I should raise 2 statues in Brussels, one for Vladimir Putin and one for Donald Trump, because they force us to face our weaknesses and to do what we had not done for decades, because we were talking about the dividends of peace and these sort of things. So it's, well, we should resist the temptation to appease the tiger and to do whatever Trump wants us to do in order to keep him supporting Europe. He is transactional. We have to be transactional as well. He doesn't like allies, he likes customers for his defense industry in particular. But he can decide anytime not to sell us what the US doesn't want to sell us. Right now, I'm touring France not only for political reasons, but also to meet with defense industries. One of the factories I met, they needed a very important part of the factory to be either completely renovated or to buy a new one. The only manufacturer is in the US. It's under the ITAR clauses, and there is no way that this French factory can get it. And Trump is not in power. So Trump just makes things more visible about our previous weaknesses and what we have to do. We have to be reliable allies every time it's needed, because it's our life insurance, but we have to build our own security for ourselves. US has to come extra and not the other way around. So far, the European defense comes extra, and the rest mostly depends on the US. This is not reasonable for the foreseeable future, because the US, and even rightly so, may have to deal with China, and is not in a situation to face two conflict zones at the same time. So let's start by step, by using a Europe first clause in our procurement. Every time it's possible to procure European, simply let's do it. We have been weak and we have tried to appease Donald Trump in the first term, and it only made us weaker.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panelists for this great discussion.